Before the Rings of Power, there were the Silmarils. Before Sauron, there was his master Morgoth. Before Aragorn and Arwen, there was Beren and Luthien. Join us as we explore Tolkien and all the ages of Middle-earth with your hosts from theonering.com, Jonathan Watson and Michael Grumbine.
You know, Michael, I've never taken my kids to Disneyland. Never. Not once.
Really?
Or Disney World.
Or
No.
not Disney World. Wow.
No, they were too young, and then we had 4 of them, and then we realized it's just too expensive. And that's okay, because guess what?
What?
In 6 years in the UK, we are going to have an entire land of Universal. What? They
are going to have?
They are going to have an entire land.
What?
For the Lord of the Rings in New England. Oh my gosh, in England. No, I said new. I don't know where that came from. But yeah, just today, which is Thursday, the 10th of April, 2025, it was announced that a source close to the Universal UK project, this is the BBC, not .co.uk, bbc.com, the Americanized version for all of us Yanks here. A source close to the Universal UK project has told the BBC what fans can expect from the new park being built in Bedford. Do you know where Bedford is?
I don't.
Okay. Well, you live there. I expect more out of you, but we'll go on.
You expect me to know where every single town in England is because I lived there for a year and a half.
Just, yeah, right. Yeah.
Fair enough. All right.
It'll have James Bond land, where you can, I don't know, have martinis and womanize. What does a James Bond land have? I don't know.
We've already got
Paddington, where you can get in touch with the child inside and have a little teddy bear following you around, and the Lord of the Rings. These are the big 3 that they talked about. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out what James Bond would, but Lord of the Rings, obviously, they would have certain I don't know if it's going to be a Lord of the Rings land, but it says they're brands that are set to appear in the park. What's really funny is rides and attractions related to Harry Potter are not to be included. I'm like, was there contractual obligation that they can't do? But anyway,
does Universal own Harry Potter?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm sort of surprised England wouldn't have.
Maybe it's because they want to do a separate Harry Potter one.
Maybe.
Who knows?
But
let's guess where Lord of the Rings land will be in that picture.
But let's read this part. The source insisted that contracts have been signed and it would be unlikely things would change at this point because they'll have other things inspired by Back to the Future, Jurassic Park, and Minions, right, from the Despicable Me series.
Sure.
And the source says, at this point, it will be little details they tweak, like, let's use a different shade of paint on that Lord of the Rings castle. I have no idea what that means. Let's use a different shade of paint on that Lord, as opposed to what other shade of paint would be used on, like, they're going to have 2 castles that look the same, and one's going to be Lord of the Rings and one's going to be the Paddington Castle.
What's more worrisome to me is that the person passing on this information, like, tell me a castle from Lord of the Rings. Tolkien doesn't use the word castle, or rarely does.
Yeah, this is a problem.
Yeah, like there are no castles. Like, we have towers of various sorts. We have gates of various
halls.
Sorts. We have halls. We have cities.
The question is, do they have the rights to do like Peter Jackson's version? Because if they don't, people are just going to be like, nah.
Yeah.
I haven't heard if they do or if they don't. I'm not sure.
I'm just picturing like a Disney style castle. I'll be like, this is Lord of the Rings. Because it says Lord of the Rings in the font.
Oh yeah, right. And what's funny is, like, if they really want to make it Lord of the Rings, they have a few choices, but most of them are from like destroyed castles. They could do Weathertop. That would be fun.
Sure, but yeah, it's Weathertop. It's not a castle. You could say it used to be, but even when it was Amon Hen, not Amon Hen. Dang it! What's the name? I went blank on the name for Weathertop before it was destroyed. Is it Amon Hen?
No, that's the Seeing Stone.
No, that's where the seat is. Yeah.
Amon Sul.
Amon Sul. Thank you.
Yeah, so this is the picture of the land here. I don't know. I'm going to try and make it bigger so that we can see it better.
That's what I was saying. Let's guess where Lord of the Rings is.
I don't know. This is like nothing showing us anything. Of
Yeah,
interest
there's no
here.
Lord of the Rings in
We
this
can't
picture.
see anything. Okay.
Or there better not be Lord of the Rings in this picture.
There's going to be a James Bond stunt spectacular, I guess. Okay. Oh, and this is where it's going to be. A drone video shows here where it's going to be. Will I get dinged on this here if I show it? So that's just a big old.
Yeah, they just found an empty spot to put it. Okay, great.
Oh, and the greatest thing is they show the picture from the Rings of Power as if that's what they're going to use for it, which would be really funny because then if they really want to like make sure that there are no lines in that park, just throw in the ring. We've got. They could have all the they could have the hobbits walking through saying nobody goes off trail and nobody walks alone.
That's right. That's right.
They walk through the park.
They could have random groups of hobbit thugs that just kidnap a member of your party as you go through the park.
So anyway, that's the big news this week. There's no other news for Lord of the Rings, which is usually a good thing because that means we can concentrate on the books and what Tolkien actually wrote. But this week, 6 years from now,
all right,
none of my kids are going to be young enough to want to go to this thing.
I'll mark my calendar.
Yeah, right. Oh man, and you know what that means? 6 years is going to be like 8 years actually.
Yeah.
What's funny is like Disneyland originally took like a year and a half, 2 years to build. It was really fast. Like they built it quick because you could back then. There was didn't have to worry about the
bureaucratic red tape was almost non-existent.
Yeah. So anyway, that's the big news of the week. But
that will be 8 years. Maybe I'll take my grandkids because I'll have,
oh yeah,
I'll probably have grandkids.
You're signing away one of your children in the next few weeks. So
yes, 2 of them this year actually. One in a few weeks, and then one in September. So
awesome.
Yep.
Yeah, they're no longer tax write-offs, huh? They're no longer insurance. They're going to be all on their own. Wow,
they're off the legal documents.
Well,
I mean,
enjoy. I
guess that it's not exactly true because we have a will.
I was going to say that's the one remaining legal document that you have to make sure that they're on is the will. The will. That's right. Well, I will move us on into actually talking about The Hobbit.
Barrels out of Bond.
Yeah, Barrels Out of Bond this week. And in our extended podcast, you guys remember that we did have Tolkien reading to us from Inu Lindley from the Silmarillion. And this week in our extended podcast, we're going to listen to Tolkien reading Noel, the Christmas poem that we have that Austin Robertson read for us, and we have a video on YouTube about it. Which you just look up Noel, and it's one of the first results on the internet. Actually, it is. I think if you look up Noel Tolkien, it's the very first result in Google. So just do that if you want to find it.
But we'll listen. We love Austin's reading, but we wanted to take a spin and see what it would sound like with Tolkien's voice.
Yeah, and I will still take Austin's reading on top of Tolkien's because it's not really Tolkien. It's Tolkien AI.
Tolkien. Well, even Tolkien, actually Tolkien. Like his books are great. But when you hear recordings of him, radio interviews, it's frequently very, very difficult to understand him.
Yeah, no, that when he would read Lord of the Rings to the Inklings did not like it. They appreciated it when he brought Christopher, his son, to read it for him, so that they could listen and understand actually, rather than just listen. So if you want to get that podcast with the extended edition of Tolkien reading Noel and us talking about it a little bit some more, go to thewondering.com/member, become a member. $4 a month. First month is free. And then we're going to be doing another member chat. We were all there last Monday. Yeah, I think it was a week ago Monday. Yeah.
Yes.
And we had a good discussion. Seems like a lot of people dropped out, but we're going to try and get more people this next week. It'll be the last Monday in April. I don't know what that is. The 28th, I think. That sounds about right. So join us there. thewondering.com/member, become member. First month is free, or thewondering.com/Patreon. That also works. It's $1. It's $5 a month there, just because Patreon takes more money. So we're just evening it out. All right, let's get into this week's episode of The Hobbit. We're going to get Barrels Out of Bond, Chapter 9. But first, before we do, we have to have our Hobbit facts.
Hobbit facts.
This one's short and brief. Did you know that Thranduil doesn't have a name in The Hobbit? The Elvenking doesn't have a name in The Hobbit. He's just named the Elvenking. He's nameless and unknown In
He's
the
like the VeggieTales character. It's been 3 seasons and I still don't have a name.
Wait, is that a VeggieTales character?
Yeah,
Which one is that?
it's in one of the VeggieTales silly songs.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
He's like an asparagus or something.
Oh, okay.
Anyway,
Yeah. But yes, so he doesn't have a name. He doesn't name him until we get Legolas, son of Thranduil, in The Lord of the Rings. So anyway, it's a fun little Hobbit fact that most of us who just know the movies and they name him Thranduil from the start. Here, no, he's just Elvenking.
right, which in a way, so my first comment will be on the chapter will be that's very appropriate for the way Tolkien is treating elves at this point. So elves at this point are from fairy, and so that's a very common thing. If you go back to fairy stories from the Middle Ages, it will often just refer to the elven queen or the elven king. They're invariably the human who gets caught in fairy it runs up against the elven court of some type, and the monarchs are just referred to by they're just called the elven king or the elven queen, and they're usually not given a name.
And it's funny. The one thing that reminds me of is, do you know who Goethe is?
Yes, absolutely.
Johann Goethe. Right. He wrote a poem called Erlkönig, which just means elf king in German. And so that's what this reminds me of, is that he named him like they just wouldn't give names to it. So it was general. I know that's part of that time period and what he was basing it on.
His identity is what he is, not his name that he's known by. So of course that will change.
That's interesting when you think about it, right? So the person who has a name doesn't get a name in the story, but the sword that doesn't have a name gets a name in the story. It's an interesting.
Also a medieval trope as well. So this is yes. I'll just say that it adds to the elves as a force of nature idea versus elves as people. Now, of course, we get, as this chapter goes on, we get very particular about a couple of elves, and who fall asleep on the job. But besides them and the Elven King, there's basically no other elves that are named. And there's definitely no Tauriel.
Thank the Lord. Wait, so does he name, other than Elrond, does he name any elves in this story?
Maybe Elrond just got a name because he's a half elf.
So we don't have any elves that are fully named in this. Any fully fledged blooded elves.
That's right.
That have names. Yeah, because it's just the butler, right? It's just or not the butler. What do they call him? The butler. I was thinking he was something else, but yeah, the chief guard and the butler. That's it. They just have roles, not names. Anyway, okay.
Yeah. Now that's up to this reading that we're doing. He actually we learn his name, and that makes him the first named elf in the second part of this chapter, the butlers. Yeah, but I'm just saying, it is interesting because I think we see a progression as Tolkien writes, where he's sort of personalizing the elves more and more, and they're not just the Fae. By the end of the chapter.
Right. All right. So let's get into this chapter. Do you want to give us a really brief overview? Just so you know, guys, we're stopping at the point at which Balin says Balin was told off to watch the guard and the butler and give warning if they stirred. So we are not getting into the barrels in this episode. We're getting everything up to the barrels, essentially.
Which is funny because that's a British phrase. He was told off to go do this. That doesn't mean he was sent off. But of course, when you tell off someone from American English, it means something very different. So,
all right. So, can you give us? You want to give us a brief overview?
This was a brief overview because there's not a lot of action. The dwarves wake up without Thorin, and they go pick a direction and head off into the forest, hoping they're going to head for the edge. And they never know if they're right or not because the elves capture them. Bilbo pops on his ring when that happens, so the elves never see him. And the elves frog march the dwarves back to the Elven King's Hall, which is a cave, not similar, but not similar to the Goblin Cave. So shallower with more clean air and sunlight, but still a cave, or clean air. Sorry, it doesn't say sunlight. So they capture the dwarves, and then the Elven King interrogates them, and they give up nothing, just like or very little. In fact, they're very angry at being interrogated, and the Elven King, in return, is very angry and gives a speech that's highly medieval in terms of the way the accusations made by the Fairy King, which I'm using on purpose here. So the dwarves are locked up. Bilbo spends a long time trying to learn where they are, and then he finds Thorin, and but can't really do much else. But finally does figure out a way to get them out via these barrels, which are dropped from the king's wine cellar into a river. And so he one night there's an opportunity, which we can get into details on, but he once the guards, essentially the butler and the chief guard, have fallen asleep from drinking too much wine, he gathers the dwarves, frees them from their cells, gathers them, and they set out to the cellars to make their escape. So that's the overview of the chapter so far, the first half.
Yeah, it's going to be a little bit of a brief chapter, but we always find enough to talk about. Always find enough to talk about.
We do.
And so the first thing that I want to that in reading this here wasn't about the elves, or wasn't about the hobbits. It's something that we never really discussed, which is that all these elves live in caves. And there are no caves. Like when elves wake, they wake under, right? So by all the elves, let's Nargothrond, we've got the Menegroth, where Thingol lives, and then we've got here, which I don't think that has a name like Menegroth or Nargothrond, right? It's just a location. It's just in
the halls of the Elvenking.
Yeah. So all these elves who woke up under the stars on the lakes, on the shores of Cuiviénen, right? They love the stars. They decide to live underground, which seems odd to me. But
yeah.
But as you can tell Tolkien is affected or is influenced by what he knows, and how he's trying almost to reclaim elves, right, from the little sprites and things like that. And so elves and the pathway into the elf worlds. And if you've read other, I've read like Stephen Lawhead and other people who kind of use the same idea, particularly in, I think it's the Irish elves, the Tuatha De Danann or something like that. I can't pronounce it correctly exactly, but right. So they had the realm into fairy was through mounds, through these elf mounds that they call them, and so like that seems to me where Tolkien is getting this from. And even when we look at let me show you here the things that Tolkien drew to show what, and I'll link these here in the show notes. He has 3 paintings he drew of the Elven King's halls, or the Elven King's gate. Here it's not like a deep cave. It's not like a massive structure. It looks like a mound, like something that you would walk into.
Yeah, I mean, what's funny to me is it looks surprisingly similar to Bag End. So you have
true.
It's lower. The entrance is lower than Bag End's entrances, but it's they make their home in a hill, so with shallow caves. Obviously more majestic. They have direct magic because the dwarves open and the doors, not the dwarves, the doors,
the magic doors. Yep.
Through magic, and Tolkien says it multiple times. So he's not gotten shy yet about the use of the term magic. Yeah, I like this one from an oblique angle.
Yeah, me too. It's sort of like he was trying to figure out what it would look like when he drew it. Like, okay, this is the front angle, right, directly into the gates, and if we're looking from the side, this is the crossing of the river that we see right here. He added a tree there, and then he actually did even one more, which is kind of even further from the side. And we still see a little bit of a spider web right here. This is a very small one, and it's a little bit different. But yeah, it's still just a mound, and it's just an opening, and it's just a little hill that's above it. Nothing dramatic, nothing mountainous, nothing. There's no Lord of the Rings castle that needs to be painted a slightly different color here. But yeah. So anyway, so that's it never really struck me that this might be why he has them living underground, because it was part of the mythology of the British Isles that the gateway to fairy, the gateway to elvendom was underground, was through these mounds, these fairy mounds. And so, anyway, that's what struck me in reading this one this time.
So I find interesting the fact, as you were mentioning, the caves of the elves. Most people that are familiar with Lord of the Rings think of elves as living in trees, for example, in Lothlorien, or in halls and towers. If they read the Silmarillion, they are all. If they read the Silmarillion, they are also aware that elves live in caves, but it's not the normal take from most people's understanding. So I agree with you. It's a melding of the old traditions of elves with his traditions, and so he does have elves in caves, but he also has elves not in caves. So
yeah, that's true. That's true.
It's as we'll later find out. So he's not married to the idea, but he does make it part of their lore.
Yeah, and so okay, so that was my thoughts about the caves. Now, the king is another unique part that seems again, these aren't the elves of the Lord of the Rings that we've come to know over the years through not just Lord of the Rings, but also through Unfinished Tales and the Silmarillion and the Histories of Middle Earth, and as we get into that. So these elves were definitely more elves inspired, and as you said earlier, almost more like the elves from his Father Christmas letters than necessarily from the Lord of the Rings. But he does, in the previous chapter, he does meld them right into the Silmarillion by saying, he still had a hunger for riches in the same way, like he essentially mentions Thingol and the Nauglamir, and how that was a point of desire of the elves of years past. And he even says here, he is still ever eager for more treasure, since he had not yet as great a treasure as other elf lords of old. So it kind of makes him feel a little petty almost, doesn't it? Not like
very,
the elf.
very much so. But pettiness of that sort is not, again, this is tapping into the longer tradition of elves. So pettiness of that sort is expected from the Fae. So his speech that he gives, Balin understandably is angry when they begin to be questioned. And Balin says, "What have we done, O king?" said Balin, who is the eldest left. "Is it a crime to be lost in the forest, to be hungry and thirsty, to be trapped by spiders? Are the spiders your tame beasts or your pets, if killing them makes you angry?" Which when I read that, I can't help but inject a little sarcasm there. I think he's being like I don't think he's actually asking a genuine question. Are they your pets? I think he's being sarcastic and saying, obviously they're not. So are these your pets that you're so upset by the disturbance? Such a question, of course, made the king angrier than ever. And he answered, "It is a crime to wander in my realm without leave. Do you forget that you were in my kingdom, using the road that my people made? Did you not 3 times pursue and trouble my people in the forest and rouse the spiders with your riot and clamor? After all the disturbance you have made, I have a right to know what brings you here. And if you will not tell me now, I will keep you all in prison until you have learned sense and manners." So this idea that there's a law of the forest that you're supposed to ask the king's leave before traveling on his road, but there's no mechanism by which you can ask the king's leave before traveling on his road. You have to literally travel on the road to meet the king, so you've already broken the law. And that kind of paradox is very, very common. Humans in the land of fairy, in stories, are always breaking rules that they didn't know existed, and laws of the king of the elves or the queen of the elves that they didn't understand, but which make perfect sense to the king of the elves or the queen of the elves, but maybe not to humans, or in this case, dwarves.
But it would make sense if you're a mobster in New York, because that's kind of like what it feels like, right? It's like, hey,
That's right.
You're in our land. You didn't pay the fine, buddy. Like, we're here for your protection.
That's right. I didn't know there was a fine. Well, that's not going to happen twice, is it? So yeah, it does feel a little heavy-handed.
It does.
But he doesn't torture them. He doesn't punish them except he does lock them up, but he keeps them fed, and he just wants answers to his question. And in a way, that doesn't seem unreasonable. There's a part of that that's not unreasonable. Like, they're traveling, a bunch of dwarves are traveling through his land on a secretive purpose, and it is his land. So shouldn't he have a right to expect them to tell him why? Where are you going? What is your business in my land? That's a pretty common expectation amongst authorities of any kind. So anyway, it is interesting, but of course the dwarves are tight-lipped, and we are reminded, as you pointed out, of elven greed. So greed is not the domain of dwarves alone. Elves indeed have greed as well for riches, and later on we're told white gems are a thing that they love. So
yeah, and isn't it funny? It's probably like the dwarves don't want to reveal why they're there, but they're right in questioning, why have we been captured in a way when we didn't really do anything and we were just hungry, and you essentially captured us for stepping into your your feast in the middle of a forest that had no borders on it, ultimately, other than darkness and spider webs. But then the elves, on the other hand, are like, no, this is our territory. Why are you here? And you're not telling us even why we're here. And the elves probably know Thranduil at this point, you would think, the Elvenking, has a desire for gold. And the Elvenking would know, oh, these dwarves have their own desire for gold too. So there's a little bit of an undercurrent going between the two of them. So they're both kind of in the right, I feel like, in not telling each other what's going on, in the sense that the dwarves don't want to tell the king what's going on, and the king isn't really going to tell them why he's probably jailing them, other than for saying,
although they presume, and perhaps correctly, what that purpose is a couple times. So when Bilbo discovers where Thorin is and takes a message, talks to Thorin, and then takes a message to the dwarves, it said they were going to try to wait for Bilbo to come up with a plan, and then it said the other dwarves quite agreed when they got the message. They all thought their own shares in the treasure, which they quite regarded as theirs in spite of their plight and the still unconquered dragon, would suffer seriously if the wood elves claimed part of it. And they all trusted Bilbo. So there's this attitude where they're going to presume that if they tell the king, he's going to claim part of the treasure.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting thing if you think about it. Like, why? Like, they're traveling through his land to go beat a dragon. What on earth would give him the right to claim part of the treasure just because they're? I mean, maybe you could say he's gonna have them pay a toll for walking through his land.
Right.
So maybe that's it. But any serious portion of the treasure of Erebor is way out of proportion to a toll for going through someone's lands. So
is it because you've got? I mean, he's got them in chains. He can exact any toll he wants to if for their freedom.
And now you're referring to the fact that that might makes right. So he has the power over them, so he can try to claim whatever he wants. I find it interesting that that's what they presume he's going to do, and we're not told he's not. So who knows? In the end, we don't know what would happen in this case because he's never told while they're still his captives. Interestingly, he does claim part of the treasure later on near the end of the book, but he does so because of what his people did with the army. So that's a different matter entirely. So anyway,
they're both greedy, but the Elvenking isn't so greedy that he will wear an actual golden crown or a crown encrusted with any jewels, because in the autumn he just wears a crown of berries and red leaves, and in the spring he'll wear a crown of woodland flowers. So, I mean, he's greedy, but he just doesn't want to show it. I don't know. But yeah, that's the king. He's so different than that. And so it makes me think about, I mean, I hate always going back to the Hobbit movies, but Lee Pace's portrayal of Thranduil in The Hobbit. What did you think about that? Because I thought he came across as so villainous.
Yes.
That it didn't follow.
Like many things, the attempt was made to dramatize and make things more extreme for movie audiences, and so his villainy was played up. They were also trying to put in an elf from, they had that vision of him with the burnt face and stuff in the Hobbit, where he shows himself. It's a weird scene where he reveals himself that he's been. In other words, he's fought against dragons before. Is basically the message. I don't
remember that at all.
Oh, you don't?
No,
because his normal face, and then all of a sudden
In the
it's
movie?
either illusion or it's implying that he actually has been scarred and he uses illusion to cover it up, which both of which are stupid ideas.
Right.
But it was but his face is very. There's one scene where I don't know if he's talking to the dwarves. I think it's the dwarves, but or maybe it's Tauriel, or Legolas. I can't remember what, but yeah, they're trying to put a Lord of the Rings elf king who is quick to anger, and I mean we know that runs in his blood, right? I mean, in the last alliance of elves and men, his father lost most of his. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, yeah.
His father lost most of his army. His father Orifer lost most of his army because of his
haste and
haste and desire to get in grips with the enemy, and he went ahead of the high elves and the men, and so or got himself trapped. So anyway, they're definitely trying to tap into the to that sort of ephemeral, quick to anger nature of the wood elves.
Yeah, I totally forgot about Thranduil in there, but that
was a disturbing shot that I had to sit there and talk through. Thank you.
No problem. I can bring back the really nice shot of the Elvenking's gate. That's far more nice. Yes, calming and beautiful. Everything. Okay. Anyway, sorry. Yeah. So yeah. So I said they seem petty. They're also far more distrustful, I would say. It's sort of the elves were like the Rivendell elves. They just sort of poked fun at the hobbits, but here they just jail them.
the dwarves, yeah.
The dwarves. Yeah. Sorry, not the hobbits. The dwarves and the Hobbit. And so they seem petty. They're far more distrustful.
Yes.
They compare themselves to the Joneses, so to speak, by saying I don't have enough gold. Motivated by pride, and it's not all those things that you think about when you think about Lord of the Rings elves. Although maybe Silmarillion elves, yeah, right. Pride is a huge motivation.
Pride, but the pettiness, like there's less of the sort of shallow pettiness in the Silmarillion. There is definitely more pride, but it tends to be on this sort of grand scale. In other words, Fëanor and the vow of his people to follow him is all based upon the murder of their king, and the stealing of the Silmarils, which are the greatest physical objects in the world. So there's a little more grandeur to their pride there than the elves' pride here in the Wood Elves. But to build on what you said, I also think like there's the whole scene where we're told about the first conversation between elves that occurs is between the chief guard and the butler, and they're talking about how we got to test the wine before the party because it would be terrible if we sent the bad wine up. I laughed because I couldn't help but think that Tolkien, knowing scripture as he does, is making a very oblique reference to the wedding feast at Cana, where where that's exactly what the steward thought had happened, was that they had served the worst wine first and then saved the best wine for last. So anyway, there's a connection anyway in my mind. Who knows if Tolkien consciously or unconsciously did it, but yeah. Well, so it's the elves are rather sort of petty and sort of. They're almost like characters, like a Falstaff type character from Shakespeare, who's hanging out, getting drunk, and which is funny because it's in total contrast to the elves as portrayed by Legolas in the Lord of the Rings movies, where he basically can't get drunk apparently. So not very Tolkien-esque. In that regard, so that's we're told about the elves given in a different light this time.
The elves are still bound to the earth, so they should still be theoretically affected by the things of the earth. They can die still, right? They get mortally wounded,
right?
So why can't they get drunk? Well, certainly, I think they probably can, even though they can walk on snow.
He'll never let that one go.
I'm still not going to let it go. Never, never, never. All right, let's move on to Bilbo, because Bilbo, last chapter we talked about how Bilbo he took on the mantle of the hero in that chapter when it was his own courage, his own actions that freed all the dwarves. Nobody else, nothing. I mean, sure, he had the ring, but it was just him, and it wasn't just him escaping with his own life. It was him like he did right when coming out of the Misty Mountains from away from the goblins and the orcs. It was him taking action to actually free the elves, free the dwarves the first time. This time he does the same thing, and it's interesting because I think the biggest thing that stuck out was now that how the dwarves they respect him, right? And even Thorin says he had to wait for the remarkable Mr. Invisible Baggins to think of something clever.
Yes.
And so they are now relying on Bilbo. They're not just hoping, like they're like, no, Bilbo will do it. Bilbo will take it. And so he's proven himself now. Now that the dwarves believe he can free them, he can save them, he'll be there to figure out the plan. We start believing it too, and our shift has been from Bilbo as the one who falls on his floor and Bag Ends screaming, struck by lightning, struck by lightning, struck by lightning, to the hero who's going to be like, all right, let's figure this thing out and let's come up with a plan to free the dwarves. I thought that was it's the biggest shift in these two chapters for Bilbo, not just for Bilbo as a character, but for us in how we view him, has happened completely by the end of this chapter, I think.
Right, and it is interesting that Tolkien, he first of all, he explicitly says that their opinion of him has gone up after that remarkable Mr. Invisible Baggins that you mentioned. He says, of whom he, that's Thorin, began to have a very high opinion indeed.
Yeah.
So they Tolkien points it out, but also we keep hearing that Bilbo would rather be back at home.
Isn't that funny? Right?
So even though he's been a hero, he's really depressed about this whole thing, this is it's not it's no quick and easy thing to stay alive and invisible in the Elvenking's Hall. Interesting. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, doesn't that, like, Bilbo's desire for home reminds me of one of Chesterton's most famous quote, is that the true soldier fights not because he hates what's in front of him, but because he loves what's behind him. He has to do what he has to do. He has to, screw his courage to the sticking place because of what's behind him, because of the home that he loves, because he needs to get back there. And so I think that's ultimately that's what Tolkien's saying, is what drives him forwards. It's what he saw in soldiers around him. It's what Bilbo has to do in order to get these dwarves free. In order to get back home, he has to free the dwarves.
Yes,
yeah.
He does. But the idea he comes up with is not very comfortable for the dwarves.
No, they quickly revert back to the, what in the world are you thinking, Bilbo? Are you a stupid jerk? Right? That the whole idea that no. There's no
literally
way.
saved their lives multiple times, right. And they still instantly revert to the meanness of dwarves.
They still say, we thought you had got some sensible notion when you managed to get a hold of the keys. This is a mad idea.
Yeah.
But then I like Bilbo's response. He's like, oh, sure, that's fine. We can go back to your cells. That's cool. No problem.
Yeah. And by the way, I don't think I'll ever get a hold of the keys again. So good luck with that.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. But even through that, right, they're like, okay, this was too much for them. They calmed down, and in the end, of course, they just had to do what Bilbo suggested, because it was obviously impossible for them to try and find their way back into the upper halls, or to fight their way out of the gates that closed by magic. Which, by the way, let me point out that Thranduil does say, there is no escape from my magic dwarves, except for the magic. Did I say dwarves? Magic doors. That's twice in this episode. You once, me once. Except for the dwarves here, and then Gollum in the Lord of the Rings. So these magic doors aren't exactly like the best doors ever.
Right. And Gollum doesn't have a magic ring. So
yeah. So he's able to escape. All right. Sorry. Little aside. I digress. But through all this, I think there's an interesting line that Thorin says. Let me read it for you. Gandalf spoke true as usual. A pretty fine burglar you make, it seems, when the time comes. I am sure we are all forever at your service, whatever happens after this. And I think that it's in contrast now to, he says, at your service, right? We are now at your service. They say to him when he opens the door to them at Bag End, and they come spilling in. they say, we're here at your service. But now they actually mean it. Thorin actually, I think, finally means it.
It's not just politeness anymore.
Yes, yeah. It's not just being, the British politeness coming through. It's actually like, no, we're at your service forever. And so Bilbo in these 2 chapters has changed from the guy who's trailing along, wanting home all the time, to the guy who saves them, who's respected by them, and who has a plan for them to get out of it. And I think that's almost what we see in most of the rest of the story that happens at this point, right? The dwarves are kind of following him from now on. He's the one that almost finds everything. I mean, he is, right? He finds everything that they need in order to get into the caves.
Yeah, it's all Bilbo. He basically saves them completely. Yeah. He has made that complete transition. He's at that point. Again, it's a transition to a hero that still wishes he was back at home, but it's nevertheless a hero, and he is now the hero of the story, not just a tag along. So that's neat. One of the cool things about this chapter, before we sign off, that I thought was fun, was I had forgotten about this, that it was no normal wine. It was the wine of Dorwinion.
Yes.
Which is a name from the Silmarillion.
I was all prepped and ready for you here, man. I had the same thing.
Sweet. That's why I have the background that I did. I was going to point out where Dorwinion is.
Here, you want to do it on the background?
You got a better picture, so that's good. So you can see it right there, northwest part of the Sea of Rune.
Let's get there.
And so
there it is. Right there.
Yep. So the river that everyone is familiar with from Lord of the Rings is the Anduin. It's the major river anyway. And that splits the Misty Mountains from Mirkwood. This is a different river. It's the river running east, or as they call it. And it combines with another river from the Iron Hills to spill down into the sea, the inland sea of Rune. And Dorwinion is apparently on the shores of that, and apparently they grow some amazing wine, grapes there that make amazing wine because it'll knock out the elves pretty quick. So that's what it is.
Yeah. What's interesting is that this wasn't actually revealed, I believe, until this is the 1970 map of Middle Earth that Pauline Baynes put together for Tolkien, and it was. She's the same one who he loved her illustrations, and so he had her do I think the Adventures of Tom Bombadil was really when he was like, she's great, let's use her for everything. So he had her do this here, and this is the first time Dorwinion actually appeared on a map in Middle Earth in the Third Age. And so if you want to go on a nice wine tasting retreat, head to the Sea of Rune, the northwest corner, get the wonderful wine of Dorwinion.
Yes.
Do we know what Dorwinion means? I bet it's got a meaning that let's see, let me look it up real fast, because I'm sure it does.
I'm sure it does, because it appeared in the Lay of the Children of Hurin, but I don't know what the meaning is.
Dorwinion is a Sindarin name, which means young land country or land of Gwinion. It's suggested as a combination of the word Dor, which means country, and Gwinion, which means young land. And that is, the latter is a combination of Gwain, young, and the suffix ion, land. So there you go. Young land. That's from Tolkien Gateway, which is a great resource whenever you look something up. They have lots of those little bits, particularly about etymology when you need it. So, that was the other thing. Although apparently Dorwinion is also mentioned in the Lay of the Children of Hurin. Its wine was famous among the dwarves of Nogrod and Menegroth. Speaking of caves, maybe it's just the elves and caves like this wine.
All the cave dwellers.
Deep red, dry wine. Let's see. So it's said there to line the burning south of Beleriand, which might suggest it was a different Dorwinion, or may just have referred to the fact it came from the more southern lands of Rovanion by way of the dwarf road of Beleriand. So in any case, Dorwinion, this is the final resting place of Dorwinion. Even if it was mentioned in the Silmarillion, perhaps we can just say trade brought it to Beleriand from the far east in Dorwinion.
Right, and this is the far east. Mirkwood is part of Rovanion, the land of Rovanion. Between everything east of the Misty Mountains and south of the Grey Mountains and north of the Ash Mountains of Mordor is Rovanion. So
Yeah, and what's funny is that I just see this note here in annotations to the to the illustrator here, Pauline Baines of this map. He did say and suggest the name Mildor, meaning the land of wines, but eventually it was struck out. He's like, nah, let's not use that. Let's use with Dorwinion. No land of wines. I know. We do call it wine country, though.
This is a beautiful map. I love it.
Yeah, this is, and it's still kind of cut off. You can see the bottom part of here doesn't have it. It's a vertical one. I think you could buy it in 1970, and I think it might be on eBay or people trying to sell, like, you know, they got the file and then they remake it and sell it on Etsy under some other name so that they don't get caught.
Yep.
But that would be fun. That'd be great to have. Yeah, it's beautiful. I still actually like it better than the one behind you. I like the colorfulness of it. I like the anyway. All right, I'll post it on the site too and link to it. I can't get.
Sounds good.
Over this. Final thoughts? Any final thoughts before we head into our extended podcast?
Nope. No, this was a fairly short one. So, but we talked about it for nearly an hour, as is our wont.
It's easy to do. Well, nearly an hour with a couple of.
All right.
Yeah, you guys didn't notice the weird breaks that we had in the middle, but yeah, we got through
power outages and things, some such. But
yeah, we made it through. All right, guys, we're going to get into our extended podcast. We're going to listen to Tolkien speaking his poem Noel, or sorry, Tolkien AI speaking his poem Noel, and we're going to take a look at that and talk about that, and maybe get a little bit more into the universal Tolkien land and say, like, what would we like in a Tolkien land? We'll jump into that. Go to theonering.com/member to become a member and get access to that, and to get access to our April 28th live chat on Zoom, where Michael and I will probably be there. At least I'll be there. Michael. Oh wait, yeah, we think so. It'll be right after the wedding, so we hope that it would be there.
I might look a little worse for the wear, but I think I'm going to try to be there.
I'll have to ship you a cigar to there. You let me know, and I'll get you one. All right, guys, we'll see you on the other side.
All right. Bye, freeloaders.